thing about how your body spends the next several hours, whether it is actively storing deep visceral fat or burning it. Not the soft subcutaneous fat you can pinch between your fingers on your arms or thighs. The hard, deep visceral fat that accumulates around your internal organs, pushes your abdomen outward from the inside, and drives a continuous inflammatory process that affects metabolic health, cardiovascular function, and virtually every other biological system in the body. Before we go any further, I need to say something clearly, because the internet is full of content that will not say it. No drink melts fat. No morning beverage dissolves visceral adipose tissue while you sit still. If a video opens with that promise, close it. What the right morning drink does is something more specific and more scientifically defensible than that. It changes the hormonal and metabolic environment of your morning in a way that determines whether your body defaults toward fat storage or fat utilization during the hours that follow. That distinction is not trivial. It is the entire mechanism. I call this principle the sugar speed bump, and understanding it precisely is what separates intelligent use of these 5 drinks from the vague hope that something in a glass will do something beneficial. Stay with me for a moment because the concept is simple, the physiology behind it is genuinely interesting, and once you understand it, every drink on this list makes immediate sense. I am Dr. Jordan Vision, vascular biologist and researcher. My work centers on metabolic physiology, vascular function, and the biological mechanisms that determine how the body manages energy, stores fat, and responds to dietary inputs. What I am sharing today is not a supplement protocol or a wellness trend. It is applied metabolic biology expressed in the simplest possible practical form. Before I give you the 5 drinks, I want to ask you to do one thing right now. Think about your current morning routine and what you typically consume in the first hour after waking. Then leave a comment below telling me exactly what that routine looks like, not what you think it should be, what it actually is. I read every comment personally, and your responses tell me more about where the real gaps in understanding are than almost any other source of information I have. And if this kind of precise, mechanism-focused content is what you have been looking for, hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell right now. Every week I go this deep into the biology that actually governs fat metabolism and metabolic health. The sugar speed bump, understanding the mechanism. Think of your digestive system, specifically the pathway from your stomach to your small intestine and into your bloodstream as a funnel. When you consume a meal or drink on a completely empty stomach first thing in the morning, the contents of that meal pour through the funnel unrestricted. Digestible carbohydrates are broken down and absorbed rapidly. Glucose enters the bloodstream in a concentrated surge, and blood sugar rises sharply within 30 to 60 minutes of eating. That blood sugar spike is not simply a number on a glucometer. It is a hormonal event. The pancreas responds to rapidly rising blood glucose by releasing a large bolus of insulin. Insulin's primary function is to direct cells to absorb glucose from the bloodstream, but it is also, critically, the primary hormonal signal for fat storage. Elevated insulin tells adipose tissue to take up circulating lipids and store them. It simultaneously suppresses lipolysis, the process by which stored fat is broken down and released for fuel. In a high insulin environment, fat burning is biochemically inhibited, regardless of other factors. This is the metabolic consequence of the blood sugar spike. Your body, reading the large insulin signal produced by the sharp morning glucose rise, spends the following several hours in fat storage mode. The visceral fat that is already present is protected from breakdown. New fat is being accumulated from dietary sources, and the metabolic environment is tilted away from the direction you want. Now change one variable. Before breakfast, before any food reaches your stomach, you place something in that funnel that slows the rate at which everything that follows can pass through. A gel, a viscous substance that coats the stomach lining and forces the contents of your subsequent meal to pass into the small intestine gradually rather than all at once. The exact same breakfast produces a fundamentally different blood sugar curve. Instead of a sharp spike followed by a compensatory insulin surge, you get a gradual, gentle rise in blood glucose followed by a proportionally smaller insulin response. The metabolic environment that follows is entirely different. Less insulin means less fat storage signaling. Less fat storage signaling means the body has greater physiological permission to access stored fat as a fuel source. The 5 drinks I'm about to describe each create this speed bump through a different mechanism. Some do it through soluble fiber that forms a gel in the stomach. Some do it through compounds that slow gastric emptying. Some do it through enzyme activation that changes how cells respond to insulin signals. But all five work by producing a calmer, flatter metabolic morning rather than the hormonal spike that drives visceral fat accumulation over time. You do not drink all five, you choose one. And by the end of this video, you will know which one suits your situation best. Drink 1. Psyllium husk water. I am starting here because this is the simplest, most affordable, and most accessible option on the entire list, and the mechanism it uses to create the speed bump is the most direct and uncomplicated of the five. Psyllium husk is a soluble dietary fiber derived from the seed husks of the Plantago ovata plant. It has no flavor to speak of, no caloric content worth considering, and costs very little per serving when purchased in powder form. 1 teaspoon stirred into a large glass of water, consumed before breakfast. That is the entire preparation. Here is what happens when psyllium husk reaches your stomach. Soluble fiber absorbs water and expands dramatically, forming a thick, viscous gel within the stomach environment. This gel is the physical manifestation of the speed bump. It does not interact with the nutrients in your meal biochemically. It does not contain compounds that alter hormonal signaling. It simply creates a mechanical barrier that slows the rate at which everything that follows, the carbohydrates from your toast or oatmeal or fruit, can pass from the stomach into the small intestine where absorption occurs. By slowing that transit rate, it flattens the glucose absorption curve and produces a smaller, more gradual blood sugar rise. The research supporting this mechanism is substantial and consistent. A 2023 systematic review pooled data from 19 separate clinical trials involving more than 4,000 participants. Across those trials, psyllium supplementation was associated with significantly lower fasting blood glucose levels and measurably improved insulin sensitivity compared to placebo groups. These are precisely the two variables that determine whether your body's morning metabolic environment favors fat storage or fat utilization. A separate clinical trial demonstrated that approximately 6 grams of psyllium fiber per day, roughly equivalent to 1 to 1.5 teaspoons, produced measurable reductions in visceral fat specifically. Not simply body weight, not simply waist circumference as a proxy, but directly measured visceral fat. The mechanism is the flattened glucose curve and the reduced insulin response that follows from it over time, applied consistently morning after morning until the cumulative metabolic effect becomes visible and measurable. Timing is the variable most people mishandle with psyllium. The gel must be present in the stomach before the meal arrives. If you consume psyllium simultaneously with breakfast, the gel has not had adequate time to form. Drink psyllium 10 to 15 minutes before you eat, not at the same time, not 5 minutes before, 10 to 15 minutes consistently. How to prepare it? 1 teaspoon, approximately 5 grams, stirred into at least 12 ounces of water. Stir it and drink it immediately upon mixing, within 30 seconds. Psyllium thickens rapidly and becomes increasingly difficult to drink as the gel forms. Drink it quickly, then consume a second full glass of plain water. The second glass of water is not optional. Psyllium fiber requires adequate hydration to form the appropriate gel consistency and to move through the digestive system without creating constipation. Without sufficient water, psyllium can actually cause the opposite of its intended effect. If you are new to dietary fiber supplementation, begin with half a teaspoon for the first week before building to the full dose. Some people experience mild bloating or gas initially as the gut microbiome adjusts to the increased fiber load. This is normal and typically resolves within 1 to 2 weeks. If you manage inflammatory bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome with significant symptoms, or any other gastrointestinal condition, discuss psyllium use with your physician before beginning. For everyone else, this is the easiest and most cost-effective speed bump available. A few dollars for a container that will last months. 1 teaspoon before breakfast. The physiological result is a measurably flatter morning glucose curve, and over time, a metabolic environment that steadily reduces visceral fat accumulation. Drink 2. Chia seed water. The second drink operates on the same fundamental principle as the first, and since you now understand the speed bump mechanism thoroughly, I can spend less time on the mechanism and more time on what makes chia different and when it is the better choice. Chia seeds are another rich source of soluble dietary fiber. When placed in water and allowed to hydrate for 20 minutes, they absorb approximately 10 to 12 times their weight in liquid and form a thick, gel-like consistency. When consumed before breakfast, this gel creates the same mechanical speed bump in the stomach that psyllium does, slowing gastric emptying and producing a flattened glucose absorption curve. Research has shown that consuming chia seeds before a meal reduces the post-meal blood glucose spike by approximately 22 to 30%. That is roughly a quarter of your blood sugar spike, eliminated simply by drinking a chia gel 15 to 20 minutes before eating. The insulin response that follows a 25% smaller glucose spike is proportionally smaller, and the metabolic environment that results is correspondingly less favorable to fat storage. The reason chia earns its own place on this list, rather than simply being a variant of psyllium, is its nutritional profile beyond the fiber content. Chia seeds provide meaningful quantities of plant-based protein, approximately 5 grams per tablespoon, and omega-3 fatty acids in the form of alpha-linolenic acid. Neither psyllium nor any of the other 3 drinks on this list provide these macronutrients. For someone who wants the speed bump effect alongside genuine nutritional value in the same morning drink, chia delivers both simultaneously in a way psyllium cannot. I want to be honest about a claim that circulates widely about chia seeds. The idea that they function as a powerful appetite suppressant that dramatically reduces hunger throughout the morning. The research on this specific claim is inconsistent, and the effect sizes in studies that do show some appetite modulation are modest at best. What chia reliably does is flatten the glucose spike and provide protein and healthy fat. It does not function as a hunger-eliminating mechanism to any substantial degree. Anyone presenting it that way is overstating the evidence. How to prepare it: 1 tablespoon of chia seeds, approximately 12 grams, stirred into 8 to 10 ounces of water. Stir thoroughly for 30 seconds, then allow to sit for 5 to 10 minutes. Stir again before drinking to prevent clumping. Adding a squeeze of lemon improves palatability and provides a small additional benefit to the acid environment of the stomach. Drink this 15 to 20 minutes before your first meal. The same fiber-building guidance applies here as with psyllium. Begin with half a tablespoon if you are new to regular fiber intake, and build gradually over 1 to 2 weeks. Drink 3, matcha. The third drink has the strongest evidence specifically related to visceral fat reduction of anything on this list, and it is the one I would recommend if you could only choose a single option and wanted the most direct mechanistic connection to the specific type of fat we are discussing. Matcha is not simply green tea in a different form, and understanding the distinction is essential to understanding why the evidence for matcha is substantially more robust than the evidence for standard brewed green tea. When you brew conventional green tea, you steep the dried leaves in hot water, extract a portion of their soluble compounds, and then discard the leaves entirely. You consume the water extract, not the leaf itself. Matcha, by contrast, involves grinding the entire green tea leaf into a fine powder, which is then suspended in water and consumed whole. You are drinking the complete leaf, not a dilute extract of it. The consequence of this difference is a dramatically higher dose of the primary bioactive compound in green tea, epigallocatechin galat, abbreviated as EGCG. EGCG is the compound responsible for most of what makes green tea clinically interesting from a metabolic and cardiovascular perspective. Because matcha delivers the entire ground leaf rather than a water extraction, a single serving of matcha provides approximately 17 times more EGCG than a comparable serving of standard brewed green tea. That difference in dose is the difference between a clinically meaningful physiological effect and a marginal one. The research on EGCG and visceral fat is more specific than most fat loss research, which tends to measure total body weight or general adiposity. A controlled 12-week study examined adults carrying significant quantities of visceral fat, confirmed by imaging. The treatment group consumed a beverage rich in catechins at a dose achievable through regular matcha consumption. Researchers directly measured visceral fat volume before and after the intervention. The catechin group showed a statistically significant reduction in visceral fat volume. The control group showed no change. This is not a study measuring weight on a scale or changes in waist circumference as a rough proxy. It is a study measuring the specific type of fat we are discussing using direct measurement and finding a reduction attributable to EGCG. The mechanism operates through 2 pathways. First, EGCG has been shown to inhibit specific enzymes involved in fat cell differentiation and lipid accumulation in visceral adipose tissue, making it harder for the fat cells surrounding the organs to continue accumulating lipids. Second, EGCG activates the AMPK enzyme pathway, often described as the body's metabolic master switch. When AMPK is active, it promotes fat oxidation and simultaneously suppresses fat synthesis. The body receives a clear biochemical signal to burn stored fat rather than accumulate additional fat. This is the same AMPK activation pathway that appears in several other effective metabolic interventions, including caloric restriction and certain pharmaceutical agents, achieved here through a naturally occurring dietary compound. There is a second reason I specifically recommend matcha over standard green tea or other caffeinated morning beverages. Particularly for adults over 60, matcha contains both caffeine and a compound called L-theanine in proportions that produce a distinctive physiological effect. L-theanine is an amino acid that promotes a relaxed but alert mental state by modulating GABA activity in the brain. When caffeine and L-theanine are consumed together, as they are in matcha, the caffeine provides its alerting and energizing effect, while L-theanine moderates the anxiety, jitteriness, and cortisol spiking that caffeine alone tends to produce, particularly in people who are sensitive to it. The result is a calm, sustained energy without the sharp peak and crash that coffee often produces. This matters for visceral fat specifically because cortisol is directly implicated in visceral fat accumulation. Chronically elevated cortisol, including the cortisol spike that large doses of caffeine on an empty stomach can produce, drives the accumulation of visceral fat through multiple mechanisms. A morning drink that provides alertness and metabolic activation without a cortisol spike is therefore more aligned with visceral fat reduction than one that does both simultaneously. The preparation error that eliminates most of matcha's benefit is using boiling water. Boiling water at 100 degrees Celsius denatures EGCG and degrades it rapidly, substantially reducing the dose of the active compound in your cup. Allow your water to cool for 1 to 2 minutes after boiling. The target temperature is approximately 75 to 80 degrees Celsius. Whisk half a teaspoon of high-quality ceremonial-grade matcha powder into a small amount of this cooled water first to form a smooth paste, then add the remaining water. Do not add sugar. Adding sugar is precisely the glucose spike the entire protocol is designed to prevent. A small amount of unsweetened oat milk or almond milk is acceptable if plain matcha is unpalatable. Drink 4. Apple cider vinegar water. The fourth drink operates through a different mechanism than the fiber-based speed bumps of drinks 1 and 2, and I want to give you both an honest account of what the research shows and an equally honest account of where the evidence has limitations. Apple cider vinegar's active compound is acetic acid, the organic acid responsible for its characteristic sharp taste and smell. Acetic acid produces the speed bump effect through a direct physiological mechanism. It slows gastric emptying rate. When the stomach empties its contents into the small intestine more slowly, glucose from a subsequent meal is absorbed more gradually, and the blood sugar curve is flatter. This mechanism is pharmacologically identical in principle to what psyllium and chia achieve through fiber gel formation, but acetic acid achieves it through a different route, direct inhibition of the gastric emptying process rather than a physical gel barrier. Beyond gastric emptying, acetic acid has been shown to improve insulin-mediated glucose uptake in muscle cells, essentially making those cells more responsive to insulin's signal to absorb glucose from the bloodstream. When muscle cells absorb glucose more efficiently, blood glucose levels rise less steeply after a meal and return to baseline more quickly. Less glucose remains circulating in the blood for insulin to manage, which means a smaller overall insulin response is required and a less pronounced fat storage signal is generated. Acetic acid also activates the AMPK pathway referenced in the discussion of EGCG. Research using animal models has confirmed this activation, and some human research supports it as well, though the evidence in humans is less complete than in preclinical models. When AMPK is active, fat oxidation is upregulated and fat synthesis is suppressed, which is the biochemical direction we want the body moving throughout the morning. The human clinical evidence on apple cider vinegar is encouraging but not as extensive as the evidence for psyllium or matcha. Studies have shown meaningful reductions in post-meal blood glucose and insulin responses when vinegar is consumed before carbohydrate-containing meals. Some longer duration studies have shown reductions in body weight and waist circumference with consistent daily use. The effect sizes are real but modest. Apple cider vinegar is not a powerful standalone intervention for visceral fat reduction. It is a useful morning speed bump tool that contributes meaningfully to the overall metabolic environment when used consistently alongside a reasonable dietary approach. I must be direct about the safety considerations, because this drink has a genuine risk profile that others on this list do not. Acetic acid is chemically corrosive at the concentrations present in undiluted apple cider vinegar. Drinking it undiluted can cause chemical burns to the esophagus and has been documented to do so. It will erode dental enamel with repeated direct contact, and unlike bone and most soft tissue, dental enamel has no regenerative capacity whatsoever. Once it is gone permanently. These are not theoretical risks, they are documented clinical consequences of the careless use of this otherwise useful compound. The protocol that avoids these risks is specific. 1 tablespoon of raw, unfiltered apple cider vinegar containing the mother, which is the visible sediment of beneficial bacteria and enzymes, diluted into at minimum 250 milliliters of water. Drink it through a straw to minimize dental contact. Do not brush your teeth within 30 minutes of drinking it, as toothbrush abrasion on acid-softened enamel accelerates enamel loss. Consume it alongside or shortly before your first meal rather than on a completely empty stomach if you have any history of acid reflux, gastritis, or peptic ulcer disease. If you have a confirmed history of any of these conditions, omit this drink from your consideration entirely. The other 4 options provide the same speed bump effect without the acid-related risk profile. Drink 5. Black coffee. The 5th drink is the one that most consistently surprises people who have been told that coffee is problematic for fat metabolism or metabolic health. It is not. And the reason it earns a place on this list is more nuanced than most people expect, because the compound responsible for its visceral fat impact is not the one most people assume. Most of the conversation about coffee and metabolic health focuses on caffeine. Caffeine is a stimulant that transiently elevates metabolic rate, increases fatty acid mobilization from adipose tissue, and improves exercise performance. These are real effects, and they contribute to coffee's metabolic value. But for visceral fat specifically, the compound with the most compelling research is not caffeine. It is chlorogenic acid. Chlorogenic acid is a polyphenol present in substantial quantities in coffee beans, particularly in lightly roasted varieties. It is one of the richest dietary sources of this compound available to most people. Chlorogenic acid exerts 2 primary effects relevant to visceral fat metabolism. First, it inhibits glucose absorption in the small intestine by reducing the activity of specific glucose transport enzymes, which produces the familiar speed bump effect on post-meal blood glucose. Second, it activates the AMPK pathway, promoting fat oxidation at the cellular level. A well-designed randomized controlled trial examined this compound directly. 150 overweight adults were assigned to consume either coffee high in chlorogenic acid content or coffee comparably low in it. The 2 groups were otherwise identical in their dietary and lifestyle patterns, and the coffees were matched in all other respects, including caffeine content. After 12 weeks, the high chlorogenic acid coffee group showed measurably lower visceral fat volume, a smaller waist circumference, and lower body weight than the low chlorogenic acid group. The only meaningful variable between the groups was the concentration of one polyphenol compound. The implication is that chlorogenic acid, not caffeine, is the operative variable for visceral fat reduction in coffee consumption. 2 practical points matter enormously for coffee to function as a morning speed bump. The first is composition. Black coffee or coffee with a small amount of milk contains essentially no added sugar and does not trigger a meaningful insulin response on its own. The moment you add sugar, flavored syrups, sweetened creamers, or anything else that introduces significant carbohydrate, you have built a blood sugar spike into the very drink you are consuming to prevent one. The benefit of the chlorogenic acid is present. The spike produced by the added sugar runs directly counter to it. Drink it black or with a small amount of plain, unsweetened milk if you find black coffee genuinely unpalatable. That is all. The second is timing. Cortisol, your body's primary stress hormone, rises naturally and sharply in the first 30 to 60 minutes after waking as part of the normal circadian hormonal pattern called the cortisol awakening response. During this window, your cortisol levels are already at or near their daily peak. Consuming caffeine during this window adds a second cortisol elevating stimulus to an already elevated baseline, which produces a larger and more prolonged cortisol response than if the same caffeine were consumed after the natural cortisol peak has begun to decline. Chronically elevated cortisol, as I discussed in the matcha section, is directly implicated in visceral fat accumulation. Waiting 30 to 60 minutes after waking before drinking your coffee optimizes the hormonal environment and allows the chlorogenic acid to work in a more favorable context. If you are sensitive to caffeine, or if caffeine disrupts your sleep quality even when consumed in the morning, decaffeinated coffee retains the majority of its chlorogenic acid content. The decaffeination process removes caffeine but leaves the polyphenols largely intact. Decaf provides the speed bump benefit from chlorogenic acid without the stimulant consequences. Putting it together, the practical morning protocol. Nobody drinks 5 things before breakfast. That is not the goal, and it would not improve outcomes over choosing one well. The goal is a single, well-placed speed bump in front of your morning meal. Here is what an intelligent morning looks like when you apply this protocol. Upon waking, before anything else, drink a plain glass of water. After 8 or more hours of sleep during which you have been breathing out water vapor and perspiring, you are meaningfully dehydrated. Rehydrating first improves every subsequent physiological process, including digestion, circulation, and cognitive function. 15 to 20 minutes before your first meal, consume your chosen speed bump. If you are choosing psyllium or chia, this is when they go in. Mix them quickly, drink them quickly, follow with additional water, then wait for the gel to form in the stomach before your meal arrives. With your breakfast or shortly before it, consume your warm morning drink. If you are using matcha, prepare it at the correct temperature and drink it alongside your meal. If you are using black coffee, consume it 30 to 60 minutes after waking rather than immediately upon rising. If you are including apple cider vinegar in your protocol, it goes alongside your first meal rather than on an empty stomach. It functions as an additional glucose management tool within the meal context rather than as a standalone pre-meal preparation like the fiber gels. That is the complete structure. Water first, fiber speed bump before food, warm drink with food, vinegar with food if you are using it. You are not managing a complicated supplement protocol. You are placing one strategic intervention at the point in your morning where it will have the greatest metabolic impact. The cumulative effect of this approach, applied consistently every morning, is a morning metabolic environment that is consistently calmer, flatter, and less favorable to fat storage than a morning without the speed bump. Over days and weeks and months, that daily difference accumulates. The visceral fat that was being continuously added to in a high insulin morning environment instead exists in a metabolic context where the signals favor its mobilization and utilization. The body does not change overnight, but it changes steadily in the direction you want. When the morning metabolic environment is consistently set in the right direction, no single drink is magic. All 5 work through the same fundamental principle applied through different mechanisms. The principle is real, the mechanisms are documented, and the practical implementation requires nothing more than 1 2-minute preparation before your morning meal. Pick the one that fits your existing routine most naturally. The cheapest and simplest is psyllium. The most nutritionally complete is chia. The one with the most specific evidence for visceral fat is matcha. The one with the best data on insulin sensitivity is apple cider vinegar if your digestive health permits it. The one you are probably already making every morning is coffee. None of them require new behavior if one of them is already part of your routine. They simply require being used correctly, at the right time, in the right preparation, and consistently enough to allow the metabolic environment to shift. That is the whole protocol. One speed bump, placed correctly every morning, let your biology do the rest. If this gave you a clearer understanding of how morning metabolic biology actually works, and if it changed how you are going to approach tomorrow morning specifically, I want you to do one thing right now. Comment below telling me which of these 5 you are starting with tomorrow and why. Your comment may be exactly what someone else reading this needs to make their own decision. And subscribe to this channel so you never miss what comes next. Every week I bring you this level of mechanistic precision on metabolic health, visceral fat biology, and what the body actually responds to. Share this video with someone whose morning routine you want to improve. You know who that person is. I will see you in the next one.
Let's dive into how your go-to healthy seafood dinner could actually be aging your brain. You might think you're eating well, but some fish hide invisible, highly inflammatory dangers. Shockingly, eating the wrong fish just twice a week spikes stroke and memory loss risk by 80%. So what should we skip? Let's count down the 4 worst fish to avoid. Number 4 is imported catfish. It's often packed with antibiotics, carcinogens, and heavy metals from polluted waters. Number 3 is tuna. As a top predator, it hoards brain-damaging mercury, massively increasing your cognitive decline risk. Coming in second is king mackerel. Its severe mercury levels can literally attack your nervous system. And number 1, farmed tilapia. It's often raised in filthy conditions and fed a highly inflammatory diet. Tilapia's terrifying omega ratio is basically like pouring gasoline on the fires of arthritis and aging. Thankfully, we can ditch those toxins for powerful, brain-healing nutrients just by swapping our seafood choices. Let's flip it. Here are the 4 absolute best fish to protect your joints, heart, and memory. Number 4 is wild-caught Pacific cod. It's a clean, mild fish that defends against age-related muscle loss. This powerhouse delivers a massive 40 grams of complete protein for under 200 calories. Number 3, sardines. Sitting safely at the bottom of the food chain, they have virtually zero mercury. Plus, just one tiny can gives you 40% of your daily bone-strengthening vitamin D. Second place is wild-caught Alaskan salmon. It's the ultimate brain food, packed with omega-3s, preserving brain volume. Its pink astaxanthin acts as cellular armor, stopping the oxidative stress that literally rusts your body. Number 1 is rainbow trout. It offers the safest, most tightly regulated freshwater nutrition available today. Delivering 1,000 milligrams of omega-3. Let's dive into how your go-to healthy seafood dinner could actually be aging your brain. You might think you're eating well, but some fish hide invisible, highly inflammatory dangers. Shockingly, eating the wrong fish just twice a week spikes stroke and memory loss risk by 80%. So what should we skip? Let's count down the 4 worst fish to avoid. Number 4 is imported catfish. It's often packed with antibiotics, carcinogens, and heavy metals from polluted waters. Number 3 is tuna. As a top predator, it hoards brain-damaging mercury, massively increasing your cognitive decline risk. Coming in second is king mackerel. Its severe mercury levels can literally attack your nervous system. And number 1, farmed tilapia. It's often raised in filthy conditions and fed a highly inflammatory diet. Tilapia's terrifying omega ratio is basically like pouring gasoline on the fires of arthritis and aging. Thankfully, we can ditch those toxins for powerful, brain-healing nutrients just by swapping our seafood choices. Let's flip it. Here are the 4 absolute best fish to protect your joints, heart, and memory. Number 4 is wild-caught Pacific cod. It's a clean, mild fish that defends against age-related muscle loss. This powerhouse delivers a massive 40 grams of complete protein for under 200 calories. Number 3, sardines. Sitting safely at the bottom of the food chain, they have virtually zero mercury. Plus, just one tiny can gives you 40% of your daily bone-strengthening vitamin D. Second place is wild-caught Alaskan salmon. It's the ultimate brain food, packed with omega-3s, preserving brain volume. Its pink astaxanthin acts as cellular armor, stopping the oxidative stress that literally rusts your body. Number 1 is rainbow trout. It offers the safest, most tightly regulated freshwater nutrition available today. Delivering 1,000 milligrams of omega-3